Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Horror Writers Fest Day 1. If you can see and hear me, drop your location in the chat so we can see where you are joining us from. And I'm going to drop some links for you. So if you can see and hear me, drop your location in the chat. Hello from the Netherlands, Calgary, Utah, Texas, Scotland, New York City, more New York City. Welcome. Hi, everyone. It looks like you can see and hear me just fine. So we will get started with our introductory information before we bring our speaker on. So welcome again to Horror Writers Fest. I'm Michelle with Pro Writing Aid, and we are so happy to have you here. I'm going to be dropping special links into the chat. Make sure you check those out. So first of all, how to access your replays. These are all going to be added to the hub page, which is linked in the chat for you. The time it takes for this can vary between processing between Zoom and YouTube. So they will be up as soon as possible. The first replay from today is already there on the hub for you, and we will be adding the other session resources there as well. These replays will also be moving to the community page, Pro Writing Aid's free online community page by November 1st. So later this week, you can go to the event recording space and check out those replays there, along with replays from all of our other events too. So there's a lot of great content for you there. Your special offer for attending Horror Writers Fest, we are going to be giving you exclusive early access to our Black Friday sale. This is our biggest sale of the year. It will get you 50% off premium and premium pro plans for both yearly and lifetime. So it's a big deal. It's a big sale that we do, and you will be among the first to have access to it. So you will receive an email automatically to give you information about this. But if you don't receive anything by November 16th, please reach out to hello@prowritingaid.com and we'll be happy to help you. If you would like to keep talking about horror writing or any writing for that matter, we'd love to have you over in our online writing community. This is where our replays are going to be living after November 1st as well. You log in with your Pro Writing Aid account information. It's free to join, and there are multiple spaces in there where you can chat with other writers, give feature requests, check out past recording information, and we also have some fun upcoming things happening there. We would love if you could share your feedback on the week with us. If you don't want to fill it out today, since haven't been much you've seen yet, that's totally fine, but we do want to give you the link now just so that you are aware of it. Your feedback plays such a pivotal role in our future planning for these events, and we love holding these events, but we want to make sure that we are doing the best events that we can for our community. So your feedback is super important for this. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd love to see at a future event. Any feedback is helpful. And we also have a fun brand new writing challenge coming up in November called 5K in 5 days. You are the first group to hear about it today, everybody attending Horror Writers Fest. So we are launching our promo with you all now. And this is where you will write 5,000 words or more between November 4th through the 8th, and we're going to have live write-ins, even with members of the Pro Writing Aid team who are also participating in the challenge, because we do have a lot of writers here. We will have daily writing prompts, teachings, discussion forums, and it's just going to be a lot of fun. So we'd love to have you there. You can sign up. It's free. It's in our community, and we'd really love to have you. Reminders for our session today. If you have any questions for our speaker, please put them in the Q&A box so that we don't lose them in the chat. If you would like to chat with other attendees, please feel free to do so. If you want everybody to be able to see your messages, though, you will have to be sure to select everyone in the drop-down menu beside the word to before you send your messages so that they go to everyone. Otherwise, by default, they will just come to us. And links from offers from Pro Writing Aid and our speakers will be available on the Horror Writers Fest Hub. So you'll definitely want to check that out. I'm going to drop the links in the chat again for you. But with that being said, we are ready to begin. So I am so excited to introduce Sue Campbell. Sue has helped hundreds of writers from newbies to bestsellers transform their inhibitive mindset around marketing and realize their full potential as authors. Her clients have exponentially increased their email lists and book sales, landed articles in prestigious publications such as the New York Times, done guest spots on popular podcasts, and more. Welcome back, Sue. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be back. These are always such fantastic events for writers. Thank you for the intro, Michelle. And I want to dive in because I have a lot to cover today. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. So this is what I call my Foundations of Book Marketing webinar. And it's also known as How the Hell Do I Sell This Book? That's the maximum of swearing that will be in this presentation in case you're sensitive to that type of thing, but it's what I hear a sentiment a lot from writers. So I want to walk you through a 4-part underlying strategy, a framework to grow your audience, and then how you customize this framework is going to be up to you, but it will give you a strategy rather than sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall. So let's get started. You might want to grab a notebook or some sort of note-taking device. And you might want to just use this time free of distractions so that you can really get your head wrapped around marketing, whether you've already been doing it or whether you're like, oh, I know I got to do that at some point. So I would love to hear what your biggest marketing challenge is, because oftentimes I can emphasize things in the presentation that will help if I see a running theme through the participants. So drop in the chat, what is your biggest marketing challenge right now? Okay, getting my book to people I don't know. Yes, that's the big one. That's the goal. That's what marketing's for. Victoria says turning interest into sales. Jim says landing sales. Lou says talking to people, cutting through the noise of others, time, converting readers to reviewers. I get a lot of engagement on posts, but people don't actually follow through with the buying. I'm guessing you're on social there, Alex, and we'll definitely talk about that. Tavia says marketing, period. Being an introvert and having to feel like an extrovert. Yeah, and the great thing about online marketing is you can kind of pick your level of engagement as an introvert, but we'll get into some of that as well. M says, figuring out my audiences. Sign up for my free giveaway because that is exactly what that webinar is about, and I'll tell you more about that at the end. Lucia says, TikTok is my challenge. I don't really like it and I haven't used it except to watch the odd thing. Okay, well, you may or may not need TikTok. So that's good news too. It's like if your ideal reader not on TikTok, or if you can find your ideal reader somewhere else, you don't need to be on TikTok. Where to start, making a plan, taking myself seriously. Yes, and Lou says having faith in myself and my work. So we've got some themes here. Where to start when you're brand new. Todd, today is a great place to start when you're brand new because you're going to get the lay of the land and know where to dip your toe in. Lacey says, getting over my marketing fears. Yep, that's huge. That's why I'm a mindset coach and a marketing coach. All right, so this is very helpful. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that with me in the chat. I can use that to help guide this presentation a little bit more. So what I often hear from writers is that they want to write, not market, right? They want to spend the absolute minimum time that they can marketing. They don't know where to start. We definitely saw that in the chat today. Marketing is confusing or overwhelming. We definitely saw a few themes of that today in the chat as well. I'm guessing that you showed up for this webinar because you want clarity around what is going to give you the best results for your efforts, right? We don't have tons and tons of time to spend on marketing. So we want to make sure that what we are doing is going to move the needle as quickly as it can. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Number one, why marketing your book using a slapdash playbook of tactics from the internet is likely not going to work. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a better definition of marketing. We saw some in the comments of like, I don't really like it. I'm not comfortable with the whole idea. I have mindset stuff around it. So we're going to talk about defining it differently, which will help. And then we're going to talk about what your number one book marketing goal should be. And it's probably not what you think, maybe, we'll see. And then finally, where we're going to spend the bulk of the time is walking through that 4-part book marketing strategy that will actually help you grow your audience and sell books. So that is what we are after today. I will leave time at the end for questions and my responses. One of the things I'd like to start out with is that when you plug into Google, like how to market a book, it's Google's really scrolly now, but when it used to be more page driven, the first couple pages were all articles that said things like, you have to write a great book, you have to have a great cover and a great book description, you have to present yourself professionally as an author. And you already know all of that, right? Like, we know we have to write a great book if we want it to really catch on and sell. And we know we need a great cover and a great book description. These are very, very basic things. And what I want you to notice about them is that none of these things actually bring people to your book. We saw someone in the chat saying, I don't know how to get my book in front of people who don't know about it, right? Who don't know me. So that is the problem with a lot of the advice. One of the problems with some of the advice on the internet. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but you got to know what you're looking for in terms of your overall strategy to make good use of it. And a lot of it is just very, very basic, like write a great book. Writing a great book alone, having a great book cover alone, presenting yourself professionally alone will not bring people to your book. So I want to give you some tools today to think about this a little bit differently and go a little bit deeper so you understand the structure of a good marketing plan. So number one, why can't we just Google it, right? Why isn't that going to work? The problem with most online marketing advice is that it is tactics, not strategy. A lot of good tactics out there, but if you don't have a strategy, you don't know which tactics are going to be in service of your underlying strategy. And just through the nature of the internet, a lot of the things that are out there are really bite-sized articles and they're very clickbaity, right? So there's, you Google book marketing and you'll get a lot of things like 100 ways to market your book in under 10 minutes, right? But we don't know of those 10 things what actually has the return on investment and is worth doing at all. Because I would rather not waste 10 minutes on something that doesn't need to be done and apply that 10 minutes towards something that's actually going to help me build my audience that I can reach again and again so I can sell my books, right? All my backlist and all of the books that I write into the future. These often don't focus on your return on investment, right? They're just like, hey, I tried this. It seemed to work a little bit and we don't know what happened over the long term. And we don't know how those numbers would apply to us. And often it's a one-size-fits-all mentality, right? Like everybody needs to be on TikTok. Everybody needs to be on X or Twitter. So the one-size-fits-all mentality, we get roped into, and that can lead to overwhelm because like, oh my God, I need to do all the things. Everybody says I need to do this, 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 and this, right? These are problems with the way that we can access information. We have a lot going for us that we have the internet because we can get a lot of information. But again, when we have the underlying strategy, we're going to be better at knowing what to ignore and what to really focus on experimenting with and implementing. So number two, let's talk about a better definition of marketing. So tell me in the chat, just give me a love or a hate or a thumbs up or a thumbs down on how you just feel about marketing in general. Yep. So we've got hate it, it's a drag, ugh, hit and miss, ugh, hate it, meh, it's okay, hate it, not my choice of activities, right? Yep, totally get it. Let's see, plead the fifth, Lacey says. Adam says, I find it very difficult. We have a crying emoji. We have a thumbs down and it's overwhelming, right? Okay, so one of the reasons for that is that we bring a lot of baggage to the word marketing. I actually wish I didn't have to call it marketing at all. But it is a useful enough term in that at least people know in general what I'm talking about, but we all bring our worst examples, right, of marketing that we experienced that felt yucky, that felt pushy, that felt, just like somebody you don't want to be, right? I don't want to be identified as that guy or that person who does it that way. So when we think about it as marketing, we run into a lot of mindset stuff right out of the gate. So the definition that I like to use, which I learned from the guy who trained me in book marketing named Tim Grahl, who's sort of a book marketing, one of the pioneers of book marketing in the digital age, is let's not think about it as marketing. Let's think about it as building long-lasting connections with readers, right? Long-lasting connections with readers. Does that feel better? Tell me in the chat if you like that better. If you're hardcore introvert, that may not sound very good either. I get that, right? But on your terms, you get to build long-lasting connections with readers on your terms. Okay, so we got absolutely love it. Yeah, that's better. That sounds better. Better, but still hard. Totally fair. Great. Yep. Okay. So that is the definition that I want you to start using with yourself, right? I am not marketing. I'm building a long-lasting connections with readers, and I'm doing it on my own terms, largely. Here's the thing about me. I don't actually care about marketing. I know that sounds crazy from someone who is a marketing coach, but really, I could do this a lot of different ways. What I care about is the impact that marketing can help your book have. And I care about who you become when you market. When you build those long-lasting connections with people, it is a personal development tool with extreme power, right? Putting yourself out there, putting your work out there, making yourself vulnerable leads to some really potent personal growth. And that is what I love about it. I love it a lot because you spent blood, sweat, tears, time, energy, money developing your books. And if you are not going to take the additional step of building those connections and those relationships with readers, you're not going to have the impact that that book is meant to have. And I feel like that's like dishonoring the process. So that's the definition I like to use and where I'm coming from on that. T says, I think that sounds worse because they're fake relationships. I'm an extrovert, by the way. Social media isn't fun for me either. And we'll talk about social. So why did the I just ask yourself, T, why did the relationships have to be fake? Right? Is that the only way to do it? So I would just question that assumption that those are fake relationships. Okay. Talk about, and if you don't like that definition, because I see a couple people, totally fair. That's one way to think about it, but I want you to reframe it for you. How can you define marketing that's in alignment with your values and in alignment with some marketing that you've experienced that you've really appreciated and loved and been thankful for? So go ahead and redefine it, rewrite my definition. I want you to use what works for you. That's the whole point. All right, so number 3. Your number one book marketing goal. I'll give you a little drum roll. I'm actually going to get to it in a second, but I want to call it out specifically because I'm going to quiz you on it at the end. It's that important, but I want to give it to you in context of the fundamental strategy. I'm just being slightly melodramatic so that it will be memorable for you. Okay, so let's jump into the 4-part book marketing strategy that's going to grow your audience. Okay. So this is called the connection system. I have 2 ways of talking about this, but this one is really like easy to latch onto and quick to understand. So this comes from Tim Grahl, the guy who trained me in book marketing. He doesn't really do it anymore. But we have 4 parts. So it's essentially a content marketing system, but it's for authors. So the first step is permission, and I'll explain all these terms, so don't worry. Content is the second piece. Outreach is the third piece, and selling is the 4th piece. And we'll revisit these terms, and I'm going to dive into each of these sections so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So the first step is permission. So permission is inherently a non-slimy form of marketing because you are saying, hey, do you want this? And people are opting in or out. And if someone opts out, you don't push it on them ever, 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 right? So people are giving you permission to tell them more about you and more about their writing, and they can revoke that permission at any time, right? So it is people allowing you into their digital space, like if they follow you on social or they subscribe to your newsletter, or your physical space. If you go to a conference and you're speaking at a conference, everybody sitting in those seats has given you permission to talk to them by virtue of having their butt in the chair, right? So that's permission marketing. And it lets you get people's attention and drive action in a way to build that relationship. And again, we want to build relationships that are authentic because you're communicating authentically. It doesn't mean you have to share absolutely everything about yourself, but you're imparting your passion for your work and what you do in a way that is authentic and that's going to attract people who are authentically attracted to the same thing. So that's how we create those relationships. So that's permission. Now, forms of permission. Social media is definitely a form of permission. If I follow you on Instagram, I'm giving your, reels and your posts and your photos permission to show up in my feed. Now, obviously with Instagram, we don't always have control over everything that's in our feed, but still, if I follow someone, I'm saying, yes, I want to hear from this person. The problem with social media is that the data shows it doesn't sell books very well at all. At all. The current exception to that is TikTok. But even that, I think we're starting to see dwindle a little bit. So there are always going to be exceptions. You can always point to, the Stephen Kings of the world who are on X and have, thousands of followers. You can always point to the people where social media is working for them. By and large, the numbers do not hold that up. There are much better forms of permission marketing where you can build that relationship with that audience and have a container for your audience that is not social media. Not that social media doesn't have a place, right? If you like it, great. But I want you to think about it as a piece of your marketing plan, but it is not your biggest asset. Building an audience on social has a couple of inherent problems. Number one, it's actually really hard to get readers to take buying actions, right? I think we saw that in the chat at one point. Like, I get a lot of engagement, but people don't click through to buy, right? Part of that's the nature of social media, where we're in a very scrolly, mood when we're on social. There are some users who for sure click off and buy things, but there are many people who do not. The majority of people do not. It's really easy to get buried in someone's feed, but really, it's really easy for the algorithm never to show your stuff at all. Even if you have X number of followers, let's say you have 10,000 followers, for any one thing that you post, unless you have a history of virality, so the algorithm favors you because it knows you can keep people on its platform, it is not going to show your stuff to all of your followers. Period. And you can actually look at this on X is a great example because they'll show you how many views something has had. And so you can look at, oh, this person has so many followers. And then this particular post, right? They have 10,000 followers and 35 people saw this post, right? Go look at it for yourself. The numbers vary a little bit, but you can go and look and be like, oh, okay. So I'm going to spend all this time building this following. And then, a tiny portion of my audience is ever going to see something that I post. The other big problem is that these platforms change all the time. They come in and out of favor. Their algorithms are updated. What's working today may not work tomorrow. And they can actually just crash without warning. And there was a couple summers ago where Facebook and Instagram went down for most of a day. Right. And I was just like, oh, God, what if it's someone's book launch day and they put all their eggs in this basket? Right. My heart was just hurting for them. There's always another day, but, we get fixated on these things. So those are some of the problems with social media. And, of course, there are other problems with social media that are cultural in nature as well. Yeah, Adam says Twitter went down for a week in Brazil a month or so ago. So there's another perfect example. So that's social. So that brings us to our number one book marketing goal, because if the answer is not to build huge followings on social media platforms, well, then what do we do? And the answer is you build your email list. And I'm doing a dramatic pause right there. You build your email list. This is your number one book marketing goal. That was the third thing on the agenda for today. The answer is that you build your email list. So with an email list, you can easily reach people who loved your first book or whatever book you recently published. And then you don't have to keep hustling for new readers every time you publish a book, right? So let's say through a great book and through a lightning strike of luck, your first book is like a runaway success. If you don't have an email list and if social media won't show your posts to all your followers, how are you going to relay the message that you have your second book out to the people who already loved your first book? The answer is an email list. The second wonderful thing about email lists is that you own it. Provided you're following the laws, which are very simple to stay in compliance with, that list can't be taken from you. Of course, individual subscribers can unsubscribe. We totally want that. We want them to be able to do that. Also, you control the message. So you get to decide what your community guidelines are. That's not going to be decided for you from a platform. And also email, for most of us, is a quieter, I didn't say quiet, it's a quieter, more intimate space where people are spending more time with the messages that they choose to open. And it's easier to have somebody click on something and go and do something from an email than it is from social media. Okay. So in order to have an email list, you need to have, tell me, just, I'm curious in the chat, how many of you already have an email list? Yeah, Arthur, that's a great point. With my ADHD, social media drives me crazy. Yeah, it's not a not a calming place for someone with focus issues. We have a ton of neurodivergent clients and an ADHD for writers group program that we do. And our developmental editor, Rochelle, is ADHD, and she's not on any social media platforms by design. Okay, so we do have some folks who do have email lists. And then some who do not. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So I'm also seeing a few misconceptions about email lists and how you grow them, but we're going to get to that in this framework. So don't worry if you're like, yeah, I have an email list, Sue, but nobody's joining it, right? That's what I hear is like somebody has a website and they have a newsletter and they're like, but no one is signing up and no one's buying my books. So believe me, that's covered. So in order to have an email list, for those of you who don't have one, you need to have a website or at least a landing page. It doesn't need to be a big full-blown website, but you do need to have a landing page where people can sign up for your email list. You need to have an email service provider that specializes in this type of list building. You can't just use, your Gmail account or your, Yahoo account or whatever you use. You need to have something like, and there are a ton of them out there. MailerLite is one that I like for writers. ConvertKit is one that I like for writers. MailChimp is one that people have heard of. I don't like that one for writers. A lot of folks are on Substack right now. Substack is great for some things, but it's really limited on functionality for more advanced things that you might want to do, like when you're launching a pre-order for your book, for example. So beware of Substack depending on what your future goals are. You need to have some sign-up forms on your website, and your email service provider will give you the way to create these lovely, beautiful looking sign-up forms that can get embedded on your website. I highly recommend that you have a reader magnet or a sign-up incentive so that when people decide to sign up for your email list, they get something of value in exchange. And then I also recommend that you have a welcome sequence or at least one email welcoming new subscribers to your list. Okay. So that's number one. We need to build that email list. Number one marketing goal, build the email list. The second piece of the permission system, the connection system, is content. So content is very easy for us to understand as writers. It's all the material that you put out into the world to help people decide if you're a good fit and if they want to keep having that relationship with you. So I like to think of the analogy for this as the grocery store sample, right? So when you go to the grocery store, this analogy did not work very well during COVID, but I think grocery store samples are back. So you want to try the blue corn tortilla chip before you decide to put it in your cart and buy it. So what can you put out into the world to give people a taste of you and a taste of your work so that like they can know, yeah, this is for me. I like this. Okay. Content, it's very wide ranging. What are some examples of content? Blog posts, newsletters, your social media posts are content. If you go on a podcast, the words that come out of your mouth are content. If you write blogs for other people or articles for other websites, that's content. If you go and give a reading, that's content. If you write, posts on Medium or posts on Substack, that's content. These other examples are a little bit more in the nonfiction space. And I know you guys are horror writers, but if you do videos or Q&As or anything like that, that would also be content. And you can get creative, right? If you have artwork, that's part of your work. That's also content. So content, there are a couple things that you need to have, right? So for permission, I showed you what are the prerequisites to make sure you need to have for that. For content, you definitely need a welcome email, at least one, but hopefully a sequence, because you want to make sure this person is building a relationship they want to build. So you need to develop that know, like, and trust factor. And you do that through sending them information in your emails, right? You need to have a regular newsletter for subscribers. Now, regular, you get to decide how regularly you send something, but I recommend at least once a month. A lot of writers with the best intentions in the world will say, no, I'm going to build this email list, but I don't want to annoy people. So I'm not going to send them an email until it's time for my new book to come out. But the message that actually sends for a lot of your audience is like my friend who only calls us when he needs to borrow our truck to move something heavy, right? If you're only reaching out when you want them to do something that benefits you, that's not a healthy relationship. So you want to be offering value on a consistent basis, entertainment for them on a consistent basis, so that you have that rapport there and they're very excited when your book comes out. On a practical level, if you send less than that, people are just not going to remember that they signed up for it, and they're going to unsubscribe, or they might even flag you as spam because they don't ever remember signing up for it. You're just not top of mind enough. So at least once a month, twice a month is great. Depending on if you're coming up on a launch, you're going to need to send more often than that, or I recommend you send more often than that. And then the third piece of content that you use is content to use with influencers. And I'll explain what I mean by influencers in a moment. But it's like when you go out into the world trying to find your people, you need to have content. You need to have stories that you're ready to tell. You need to have stuff that you're ready to share. So those are all things that you should have in mind for content. This is really the comfort area for a lot of writers, right? When I tell them about this, they're like, yeah, I'll write some blog posts. I'll come up with some content. That's cool. But if we only focus on setting up an email list and creating content, this is where people, when I'm talking to them, say, yeah, I have a website. I'm publishing things on the website and no one is signing up and I'm not selling any books because you're waiting for people to stumble into your digital spider web. So that is what brings us to this piece of the system, which is called outreach. And this is so often what is entirely missing, or what is missing in a large enough volume or consistent enough basis. So outreach is moving people from not knowing that you and your book even exist in the world to now, oh, they know you exist. And this is the magic ingredient. If you are not doing outreach of one kind or another, you are very unlikely to be able to grow your audience and sell books. Again, there are lightning strikes that happen in the world. I get that. But if we're going to do the work of building those relationships, we need to know who we're looking for and then go find them. So often the way we do this is through influencers. So this image is here for a reason, because a lot of people, when they hear the word influencer, they think of, young people who have these huge social media followings, who are peddling, cosmetics or, doing tutorials on beauty or food or whatever. I want you to think about the term much more broadly, and I want you to think of it as someone who can just get other people to buy your book and become your fan. So that is an influencer. So that could be other authors in your genre are influencers, other horror writers, bloggers, people who blog about horror, book reviewers, podcasters, people who book the events, even if they're not the big keynote speaker, the people who are doing the conference bookings. Journalists can be influencers, librarians can be influencers, and yes, people with large social followings are influencers. Great, they've already built the audience of 3 million people. Now you're talking some numbers that you can actually penetrate. So if you can get them to talk about your book on their social platforms, then you don't have to take the time to build that 3 million yourself. You can just use somebody else's audience, provided there's an overlap. Also, people who have large email lists are influencers. This is not an exhaustive list for sure, just to give you some idea. because of, your particular genre or what your books are about, you may have influencers that aren't available to the rest of us because of the themes that you're talking about. So outreach sounds like one part of a 4-part system, but you can unpack it further. So I want you to have an understanding of what's involved in outreach. So I'm going to give you a super quick nickel tour of that. So number 1 is mindset. This is the scariest part of marketing, is getting yourself out there in front of people. You're going to get ignored and you're going to get rejected. And we have to accept both of those things in order to get yeses, in order to build the audience, in order to sell the books. So mindset is step 1, but it's also step 2.1, 3.1, 4.1, 5.1, etc. You're going to need to keep working with yourself. I am writing a book right now called The Story You Tell Yourself, how to reach your creative goals by changing your inner narrative. Because as writers, I've seen this for years and years and years, and I've talked to thousands of writers. We have inhibiting stories that we tell ourselves that get in the way of us being able to make an impact out in the world. So I have whole other webinars on this, but I wanted to put that out there front and center. Like, you're going to have some mind trash that you need to clean up periodically in order to do this and do it sustainably and like be devoted to it. And I don't mean like this is another part-time job, like you have to do it 20 hours a week. You just need to be consistent, drip by drip. We need to be building this outreach. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I want you to set goals on how much you're willing to commit to for outreach. And this is going to be different for everyone because we all have different lives. But I want, instead of saying, oh, I pitched a podcast one time and I never heard back, so Sue's full of it, that doesn't work, right? You have to be able to commit to trying something for a certain period of time. And that's the way we work toward that goal. We don't just try something once. It's like, all right, we're going to commit to trying this, and you get to define what that is, but really take it seriously and set some goals, not around outcomes, but around what you're willing to do. So measurable for you to complete. Number 3, I want you to know who your ideal reader is. You're looking for a specific type of reader out in the world. You need to know who that is, because that's going to help you answer every other marketing question that you need to answer, right? So what does my book jacket need to look like? What does my website need to look like to attract, Kyle, my ideal reader? And your ideal reader, I've got a giveaway for you. The link that Michelle shared will give you another webinar that will tell you how to create a reader persona, because we don't have time to go into it all today, but you need a very specific character sketch of who it is you're looking for out in the world that you can use as an avatar for your ideal reader. And that's going to help you make so many decisions. The next step is research. So once you know who you're looking for, then you do the research of, okay, who already has an audience full of Kyles, right? Great. Those are the people that I need to reach out to. Step 5 is cultivating relationships. The clients I have who are the most successful, and I've worked with best-selling authors, I've worked with like perennial selling authors, they're the ones who have built up good relationships over time that they can call on when they need them because they've been helpful to that person in the past. So it's not just relationships with readers, it's also relationships with all of those other types of influencers that we talked about. Now, you can send cold pitches to influencers and still get a yes, but I do want you to be thinking in terms of building and cultivating relationships over time. This step 6 is doing that ask or making that pitch to the particular influencer. And you're looking for a win-win. You are not sending a copy of your press release to as many influencers as you can find. Just don't even write a press release, right? Don't do it. It makes you think in a very limited type of marketing way. I hate them. I hate press releases. I want you to think of, I'm going to spend the time to do some research, figure out this influencer, and what's the win-win? Because influencers have to serve an audience. That's their job. They have to inform, entertain an audience. And if you can help them do that, and you can make a compelling case to do that, it's going to be very easy for them to say yes. So you're going to send a pitch that is a win-win and that is very targeted to that influencer. And then finally, you're going to deliver. You're going to show up professionally with whatever you said you were going to do, whatever your part of it is, and you're going to be delightful to work with. And so not only will they want to work with you again, but they're happy to recommend you to their other influencer friends. Okay? All right. Final piece. First, we had permission, then we had content, then we had outreach, and the final piece is selling. So this is simply offering your book to the right people. A lot of writers and people in general hate the concept of selling. It makes them feel oogie. They do not like it. They don't want to be a salesperson. I want you to think about this differently. If you don't like the way I'm going to think about it, I'm going to explain it here, tweak it, find what works for you. But you can sell in a way that is valuable and where you're serving people. So there's a coach I follow who calls this clean selling. She has her own definition, but this is mine. Virtuous actions have virtuous results. So I straight up stole this from Buddhism. Virtuous actions, right? So you are writing a book, you're writing to entertain, you're writing to transport someone to another world, to make them feel a certain way that they're seeking to feel. That is a virtuous act in and of itself. So now the next step in the virtuous act is to find the reader who wants that and offer it to them. That is actually a virtuous act. And that will have virtuous results. It may not be the exact result you want to have, but you know, life is very creative about the way it delivers things to us. So you may find a result that's even better than you could have imagined. Writing books, period, making art, period, is a virtuous act. So I want you to always remember that you are adding value to the world, but you have to share your gifts with the people who want to accept them. So selling gets yucky when you're pushing it on someone who it's not an appropriate fit for. Right? If you are trying to push your book on someone who never reads horror because it's terrifying for them and they don't like that experience, that's going to feel yucky if you're pushing it on them. So you're looking for the ideal reader, your Kyle, right? Or whatever you decide to name your ideal reader. You can find that person and offer them your book, and that is totally their jam. Perfect. That's a virtuous act. You made that person's life better for a very small monetary investment. If we're talking about a book and what it can do for someone, it's the best deal you can possibly have. Okay, so how do we put this system all together? We've got our email list. We create some content. We go out into the world and do some outreach, and then we bring people back to our email list and we offer them the book. So that's the selling piece. So I'm going to walk you through a couple scenarios. There are so many ways to spin this out. It's only because of limited time that I'm only showing you two. So I don't want you to walk away thinking that's the only two ways it can be done. You need to use your writer's imagination and be like, okay, how do I apply these 4 basic principles for what I have going on? So first example, you befriend an influencer in your space with a popular podcast. This is what social media is fantastic for, making one-to-one connections with people, not like constantly pushing out a link to go buy your book, but like, hey, there's a cool influencer. I love what this person's doing. This is a fantastic podcast. I'm going to start chatting them up on social media and maybe we can become friends. One of my best friends in the world, I met on Twitter when it was Twitter, like 15 years ago. One-on-one relationships, real authentic connections. Actually, social media can be great at that if that's how you decide to use it. So that's step 1. You can befriend an influencer in your space. Step 2, then you can pitch that influencer to be on their podcast. Again, you can cold pitch too, provided you make a very good argument, but certainly it helps to the first time that you pitch someone is not the first time they've ever heard of you. So that helps. So that is content and outreach. So you're asking that influencer to let you go in front of their audience, and you're going to deliver some content as a part of that podcast. And if you ever listen to a podcast or, you know, an interview on the radio or anywhere, at the end, you know, let listeners know where they can learn more about you. And then you send them to your email list. You invite them to subscribe. not by saying, hey, sign up for my newsletter, because nobody cares about our newsletter, but by saying, hey, I have this special thing for people who join my email list, and you tell them about the special thing, and then you tell them where to go sign up for the email list. Once that person is a subscriber, then they're going to get a welcome email that delivers that thing that you promised. And then they're going to get additional content over time related to your work. So that's content. And then every newsletter has a blurb about your book in it and a link to buy it. That's not all that's in the newsletter, but that's in there. So that's selling. Again, just one way to approach the system. Here's one where you don't need anybody to say yes to anything to make it happen. So here's example number 2. You review a book from a well-known author on your podcast or on your blog or on your whatever you have, right? Whatever thing that you do. So that's content. You're being the book reviewer. And then when you promote that, you can tag that author on social media when you promote the post. Social media, I do not count as outreach because it is so bad at reaching people, right? For most of us who are just regular humans and don't have time to really devote to becoming like a social media influencer. So I don't count that as outreach. That's content, putting that tag out there, because only people are going to see it are the people who are already following you, if you're lucky, and it's not going to be all of them. But when you tag that author has a different audience than you do. Most authors, if they're on the platform doing their own social, or especially if they have someone else doing their social and you tag them, they're going to reshare that. So now it's outreach because it's reaching fresh eyes from that other person's audience. And then on that podcast, people go click on that link and listen, and the podcast ends with a call to action to get the free thing, right? That sign up bonus and join your email list. And then your newsletters have a blurb about your book and links to buy, right? Again, those are just 2 potential ways of doing this. So we're going to move into Q&A here in a moment. I want to recap what we talked about. So we talked about how problematic it is to just be looking at tactics on the internet. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but now you can evaluate that tactic and say, okay, does that make sense for my ideal reader and for me and what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do? Okay. And then what is it? Is it permission? Is it content? Is it outreach? Is it selling? Right? You can go through right now and make a list of everything that you're doing for your marketing and then say, oh, is this permission, content, outreach, or selling? And you'll see where your gaps are. And 9 times out of 10, your gaps are in outreach, right? But also it's a big gap to not have a newsletter or an email list that you're building, because then if you go out and do outreach, you don't have a way to hang on to those people once they find you, because you don't have them on your email list now. So those are the 2 biggest problems. Then we talked about a better definition of marketing. So create your own if you didn't like mine, but mine is I'm creating long-lasting relationships with readers, with my audience. And then number 3, this is where the quiz comes in. Tell me, what is your number 1 book marketing goal? Email list. Tavia wins that one. Super quick. Yep. Create your email list. And then we looked at the foundational 4-part book marketing strategies, right? So that's the connection system. So permission, content, outreach, and selling. That is the strategy. Everything plugs into that. So it needs to make sense. If you already have all your content needs covered and someone comes through and says, you need to start a YouTube channel, you can question that. Do I really need to create more content? Maybe you do. Maybe then you can repurpose, right? But you need to evaluate, where is this fitting into my strategy? And is that an area that I need to add to, or am I good there? Okay, so your next step is to figure out your reader persona. If you don't know this already, who is the ideal person to pick up your book? So if you don't know who that is and you want to figure out how to figure it out, you can go to pagesandplatforms.com/PWA, and I'll send you an on-demand webinar where I'm showing you how to create that reader persona. I'm telling you, reader persona is going to make your marketing so much easier because you will know who you are actually looking for. And if you can saturate a space for one type of reader, those are the people who are going to love your book so much, they're going to, proselytize for you and spread the word about your book. So I'm very, very pushy about knowing who your ideal reader is, and not just in terms of broad demographics. Like it's anyone who's ever read a horror novel between the ages of, 18 and 36. Way too broad, doesn't help you make any decisions. So you need to get really clear. That doesn't mean we're leaving other readers out, but it gives us somewhere to concentrate our efforts and help get that word of mouth going. Okay, so we have time for questions and answers, about 12 minutes. That's pretty good timing, if I do say so myself. So if you put a question over in the big old chat, I am not going to be able to see it because you guys were crazy in there and I love good chats. But if you want me to actually answer a question, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a Q&A box. So I want you to add your question in there. Oh, great question from Dudley. So what are good examples of reader magnets? So reader magnets, I just, for everybody again, are something that you are giving away in exchange for someone signing up for your newsletter. They're giving you something really valuable, which is their email address. So they deserve something really valuable in return. This is a great example of where your ideal reader can help you make a decision. What would my ideal reader want? Right? So of course, we've seen this a lot. If following other writers, they're going to give away maybe a prequel, maybe a first in series, maybe a short story. Those are obvious fiction examples. We are not all so prolific that we have, right, endless stuff that we can just pull out and use as a reader magnet. So it doesn't have to be an initial, full work of fiction. It can be other things. It can be your guide to, underground horror stories from the 60s and 70s, if that's appealing to your ideal reader, right? You've got to vet your idea of your reader magnet against what your ideal reader wants. So I can't tell you exactly what that would be because I don't know who Dudley's ideal reader is, but it is something of value to that person that is highly related to the kind of thing that you write about. Right? We don't want to do like, oh, my ideal reader would love this thing, but it has nothing to do with the kind of books that I write. We want it all to be like an experience where they get your vibe. And that starts with them learning about you and signing up for your email list and getting that reader magnet all the way through them reading your books. So great question. This might get real annoying because a lot of times my answer to questions is it depends on your ideal reader. Let's see. Dudley says, would you recommend traditional publishers or self-publishing? I don't recommend one or the other. I'm totally agnostic on this point. I just want authors to understand the pros and cons of each system based on your particular goals. So, for example, if you are someone who doesn't have the first clue of how to create the actual product of a book, so you don't know anything about cover design, you don't know how to find designers, you don't know about interior formatting, you don't know how to find an interior formatter, right? Like creating the product of the book is what traditional publishers do. They honestly do very little marketing for most writers. Again, not all. I've had a couple clients that were happily surprised by what their publishers gave them, but by and large, that's not the experience. So if you don't want anything to do, or you think it would be too hard, or you don't have the time to do it on your own, then you do not want to self-publish or independently publish is the term that I prefer. In that case, you're going to want to go with a traditional publisher or perhaps even a hybrid publisher if you do have some, money you can put up front. So a traditional publisher, they are going to create the book without you having to pay anything up front. Maybe you get paid something up front. Maybe it's a small advance. Maybe there's no advance. We don't know. It's going to depend on your particular deal. But traditional publishers are going to create that product for you, and they're going to create the distribution for you. Independent publishing, you are going to have to be responsible for all that. Even if you don't do it yourself, you're going to be the project manager or the ultimate owner of all of those decisions. So do you have the time for that? Do you have the inclination for that? And again, marketing, you're going to have to do either way. Sorry, folks. Either way, whether you're traditional or whether you're independently published, you're going to have to take on your marketing. That's just the way the climate is right now. And I don't really foresee that changing. Maybe it will. But again, there's a lot of pros and cons. Educate yourself and then make an informed decision. Also, if you're really impatient, then you probably don't want to go with a traditional publisher. If you want to have creative control, and you've got something unique, you may not want to go with a traditional publisher there because you won't have as much creative control. So lots to think about. And again, I want what's best in alignment with your goals. So I don't have a preference. It's up to each individual author. Adam says, I find it very difficult to befriend influencers on social media. Do you have any tips? Do you post regularly on social media? And do you have a platform that works best for you for making connections? So tips for befriending on social media is to, there was a famous sort of personal development speaker named Zig Ziglar. And he's like, you'll get everything you want in life if you spend your life helping other people get what they want out of life. Right. So you want to think of, how do I make that influencer's life a little easier or a little better? So you can start by, resharing their stuff on social media, leaving thoughtful comments on social media. You can write reviews of their books or reviews of their podcast. And this isn't about sucking up, right? I want you to have authentic caring about this influencer and what they do. Don't just pick someone because you think it'd be good for your career. Like, let's be thoughtful about this. And that way we don't have any hesitation about like, oh, this is great. This person deserves even more followers, right? Also, you can start small. I wouldn't start with the people who are super well-known and famous already, because they're probably not doing their own social media. So it's going to be hard to befriend them. So oftentimes this is going to work for, mid-tier influencers. It's also great to start out with people who are kind of at the same level as you, because then you come up together, right? And you help each other up the whole way. Again, what platform you choose is going to be dependent on who your ideal reader is, because your influencer that's going to work for this is going to be on the platform where your ideal reader is too. So I can't tell you there's one perfect platform to be on. I hope that helps. It's mainly about authentically connecting, being helpful, telling them why they matter, not, blowing sunshine. You want to be really authentic about the way you do it. My friend John, he's actually the one I mentioned, who I met on Twitter like 15 years ago. He's a master at befriending people on social media and influencers. And I told him a couple of years ago, I'm like, you need to make a class on that. Like, he's the one who should be making that class. Anonymous attendee says, if you're going down the traditional publishing route, are you responsible for your own marketing? Yep, I answered that. Yes, indeed. And it's way easier to get a traditional publishing deal if you've already built an audience. So the one exception to my social media doesn't sell books rule, that's true. But sometimes a social media following will help you get an agent and a traditional publishing deal, because it's something they can readily verify that you at least have access to that audience. But you can still grow your email list while you're doing that. And that actually has more clout. And then you just want to verify for them that you really have that. Anonymous says, what do you think of book boxes? Are they a good avenue to pursue and get your name and book out there? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by book boxes. I think you mean like those subscription services where they deliver books every month. So if that's what you're talking about, then yes, those are great. If you can get yourself into a book box, that's a built-in audience where those books are already going to go out. And that reader might not have found you otherwise. So yes, if your book lends itself well to that, you can definitely try that. Beware of scams. Like, make sure you vet that particular book box service to make sure that they are the real deal. But for the legit ones, that can help a lot. Lou says, can you please share some businesses to help with email list? So I'm going to approach this answer two ways because I'm not quite sure which direction you want. So the types of email service providers are MailerLite and ConvertKit are my two favorite. But there are, MailChimp and things like that. If you're talking about how do you get it set up and can someone help you set that up, you can, I mean, we do that on a somewhat limited basis. We have limited slots for that, but we will set up your email list for you. So you can go to info@pagesandplatforms.com and ask. And then I would just Google like service to help me set up my author newsletter, something like that. You can also, if you know you want to outsource it, that's great, because then you have time for other things and other ways that you could invest time in marketing. But if budget's an option for some of you out there, there are a lot of YouTube videos that will show you how to do it. And there's customer service from the actual email list provider too. So it is within reach for a lot of people if you just do your homework a little bit and are willing to watch some videos and do some reading and click some buttons. All right, we're running out of time. I am definitely not going to get to answer all these questions because Michelle's going to come and give me the hook. Let's see. Yes, the video will be available later. And Tom says, is this only for self or indie publishing? Absolutely not. But again, like whether you're independently published or traditionally published, you still have to be responsible for your own marketing. And this system works beautifully for both. And I think that's all I'm going to have time to answer. Okay, Michelle.
Thank you so much. This was lovely. And thank you, as always, for putting on a great presentation. Thank you to everybody who came to watch. And this will be up on the hub as soon as the recording is done processing. And we will have the slides and the audio transcript file there as well. So we will see you in an hour for our next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Good luck.
Bye.